Good morning, everybody. Welcome to those that are just joining us. We've got a few minutes until we start, so as always, I'll just let everybody join in, get comfy, grab yourselves a coffee, whatever you need to do. And as always, while we're waiting, if anybody's got any questions, good morning, Simon, then pop them into the question bar and I'll do my best to answer just as we're waiting for everybody to join. Another glorious sunny day today. My dog's already out in the garden enjoying the sunshine. I do apologise in advance if she starts barking. She's quite active this morning for some unknown reason. I do hope everybody's well. Good morning, Georgina. Nice to see you. Good morning, Olivia. Lovely to see you too. Thanks for checking in. Nice to see you too, Olivia. Well, not see you physically, but see you on the call. It's the funny thing about these online sessions, isn't it? I am incredibly well, yes. It's sunny, it's Friday. What's not to like, quite frankly? I do hope everybody else is keeping well as well, and that you're all ready for the weekend. It's very exciting, isn't it? As of next week, 6 of us can meet together. Is anybody planning to do anything with that? Ah, of course, it's been half-term holiday this week. Yes, that's right. Oh, barbecue, says Simon. Oh, lovely. How super. Just the right weather, isn't it, for barbecuing? We'll just give everybody else a couple of minutes to join. We're not quite at 10 o'clock yet. Yes, next Wednesday, Olivia, is our last session. So we've got sessions on Monday next week and sessions on a session on Wednesday. So Monday and Wednesday next week. That's right. And don't forget, Wednesday's session next week is all about sort of taking it forward. So thinking about what you can do with the qualification in the future. And to, answer any questions that anybody's got. Yes, Olivia, I don't think that's a problem at all. I'm sure head office can sort that out for you. That's not a problem. How are we doing? We're at 10 o'clock. As I said, I'll just give everybody a few minutes to join before we get going this morning. Okay, we've got quite a lot of us on the call this morning, so that's lovely. Thank you all very much for joining me today. I do hope everybody's well and enjoying, as I was just saying, enjoying the sunshine. What a glorious sunny day in Newbury, where I live, and it's looking good for the weekend. So I hope you've all got plans that involve some sort of outdoors activity over the weekend, because it looks like it's going to be a good one. We need to make the most of the weather in this country. There are no guarantees that it's going to stay like this. So a very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining me on Friday this week. It's been a bit of a funny week, hasn't it, having a session on Wednesday and Friday. And just to confirm, next week are our last two sessions, and we're going back to the session on Monday, which will be about skills, so how to teach skills in your classroom. And then on Wednesday, I've got some sort of advice for you, but I'm also here to answer any questions. So store up those questions for next week, and I'll do my best to answer them all. Super. So today we're going to be looking at assessing students. Now this is quite a wide topic because you can assess your students sort of at any moment, and in fact as teachers we're sort of constantly assessing our students when we work with them. We're constantly listening to them, looking at what they produce and sort of thinking about how they're progressing or any areas that they really need help with. So in reality it's a sort of an ongoing thing that we do. However, I want to sort of have a look at it today, perhaps in a little bit more of a structured way. So some things that we can do to just check in with our students and see how they're getting on, and perhaps in a way that they don't even really realise that they're being assessed. Because for many of us, and you'll remember from Wednesday's session, we were talking about things that stress you out, so things that make you very nervous. For a lot of people, it's exams. And so as soon as you say the word assessment or exam to your students, some of them get very nervous, very stressed, and they don't perform to the best ability. So we want to try and take the stress out wherever we can. And so we're going to have a look at some ways today of doing that. So as always, if you've got any comments or questions, pop them into the questions section in your control panel, and I'll do my best to answer them as we're going through the session or towards the end. Lovely. So let's get cracking. So today's outcomes, I want really for us to understand why it's important. So why do we assess? We know that students find it quite stressful. Sometimes it can bring extra work for the teacher. So why on earth do we do it? But it is important. I want to show you the Common European Framework. So I want to show you sort of how that works so that we can start to use that when we're assessing our students, because it gives everybody a common language. And then we're all measuring equally, and as they move, as your students perhaps move to a different teacher or maybe move to a different country, they're using the same framework and it gives them consistency. Okay, and I want to have a look at some practical ideas. As always, the idea of these sessions is to give you some is to try and give you some practical ways of doing these things. Lovely. Okay, so let's get cracking. So my questions to you first of all is, why is assessment important? First of all, for the student. So why does the student need to be assessed when it causes them so much stress? Yeah, absolutely, Simona. The obvious one is to see the progress that they've made, to see that they're improving, Georgina. Absolutely. So they know where they are and how they're doing, Maisie. Absolutely, yes. Progress, exactly, Olivia. Oh, really good point here, Simon. I really like this. It's also to determine whether the teaching that we're doing is meeting their requirements. So teaching and learning don't always happen together. Sometimes we can be teaching, but that doesn't necessarily mean that learning is taking place. So if you like, it's also for us to sort of to check in with ourselves. I love that point. Thank you, Simon. Chloe says to identify areas where they need a bit more help. Absolutely, yes. So they can see there are improvements, and those two things really really work together, don't they? So Chloe, you're sort of saying areas where they need to improve. Safia's saying they can see where they're doing well. So those two things are really important, because I can tell you that the vast majority of students around the world tend to underestimate where they are. So actually being able to show them what they can do is a really, really lovely thing. It really builds their confidence. Absolutely, Danny, to see where they can improve further. Yes, to practice. Exactly, Monty. So a really good thing is to do some practice exams so that when they come to the real exam, so for example your GCSEs, your A-levels, whatever exam you're doing, you've had a little bit of practice and it's not all new and strange. And external exams, absolutely. Also, Olivia's made a really good point here. Students like to have exams to get confidence and to get a certificate. Yes, because the certificate is your proof, isn't it? So when I leave the language class and I'm going to get a job or I'm going to university or whatever it is I'm doing, I can say, look, I have my official certificate. It says that I've got this level of English. Perfect. And a certificate really does provide motivation. You're so right. Excellent. All fabulous points. Now, Simon sort of touched on this already, which I really like, Simon. Thank you for that. So why is it important for the teacher? So as Simon said, we need to see that our teaching is actually meeting their requirements. So are we teaching and are they learning? That's really, really important. Any other reasons that assessment of students is important? So make sure your methods suit them. That's right. So making sure that the way you're teaching is actually being sort of received well by them. So it's for our own importance. So we need to see where they've improved. How do we tweak our lessons to make sure that we stay on track? Absolutely. I love this, Simona. What a lovely point. So, is there any level gaps? Exactly. So if there are any gaps in the classroom, so perhaps 80% of the class have got it, but maybe there are a few in the class who are still struggling. So we need to be able to see that, don't we? And an assessment can be a good way to do that. Good. Highlight any sort of weaknesses in the class, that's right, or in the language sort of gaps. Yes, and see if we need to change anything. So it really is a two-way process. It's for the student, but it's also for the teacher. It's really important for us. It also, from a very practical point of view, it gives us ammunition, if you like, to be able to talk to the student when we're counselling them and suggest whether they need to move up a level or to stay in a level. So if we've got some grades and we've got a sort of a tangible result from an exam, then it's really easy for me to talk to the students and sort of say, well, and I've got a student who's very nervous about going up a level. Oh, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. Now, if I've got the exam and the exam demonstrates that that student really has understood the level, then it's much easier for me to say, well, look, you did really well in your exam, you're ready to go up a level. Similarly, you might have students who are really, really keen to progress, but they haven't quite got the level. So again, your assessment provides evidence to back up your point of view. Good. Now, I haven't finished yet. Oops, I'm so sorry. That's not what we want to do. What about for external stakeholders? Why are assessments important for external stakeholders? Now, external stakeholders is just a fancy name for anybody who's not in the classroom. So it's not you, the teacher, and it's not your students. It's anybody else who might have an interest in what's happening in that classroom. So why do they care? Oh, lovely point, Georgina, absolutely. So that the parents know they're getting their money's worth, yes. And I will tell you now that when you're dealing with young learners, you always have two customers. So you've got your customer who's paying for the course, that's the parent or the caregiver, and you've got your end user who is your child in the classroom, and you need to please both. So yes, parents need to see they're getting their money's worth. So for example, you remember we talked about the figure of the director of studies. So the director of studies can use the assessments to see that different classes are at the same level. So are the teachers sort of teaching not the same, but are they at the same point? Is there sort of parity and standardization? Good. So some people need to see students' results, so it can really help the reputation of the school. So if you think about in the UK, we have tables, don't we? And exam results feed into those tables, the same at university. Ofsted, exactly. Now, it might also be that you have students who are sponsored by their companies. So very similar to the parent-child situation. Might be that the company wants to know how they're doing. It's also important for universities to see that students have got the correct level of language to be able to study there. It might be for a job. So when I worked for the British Council, we had certain jobs that had to be filled by people with a certain level of English, and we needed them to demonstrate that they had that level of English. So it can be for a number of reasons for external stakeholders. So it's important for all three groups. Okay, so let's have a little think about some more questions. So when I say to you jagged profile, does anybody know what that means? Don't worry if you don't. That's the purpose of the session, is to clarify anything that we're not sure about. Anybody any idea what a jagged profile is? You've all gone very quiet, so I'm assuming that we're not sure. That's fine. Peaks and troughs of learning. Oh, that's an interesting point, Simon. Yeah, that's the sort of the process of acquiring knowledge, isn't it? Sometimes we go through a sort of a spurt, and then sometimes we plateau, don't we? That can be an issue. In this particular case, a jagged profile means that students have got different abilities in different skills. So they might have, for example, a very high ability in reading, but their speaking is lower. So they're not at the same level for all of their skills. So they have what we call a jagged profile. So for example, in Singapore, an awful lot of students had a very, very high ability, very high level in reading and listening, but their speaking and writing brought their level down. So they had sort of what we call, so we've got up here and down there. So we've got what we call a jagged profile. Lovely. Now then, what do we analyse when we assess a student's speaking ability? So I sort of say, oh, lovely, today we're going to assess speaking. What do you think goes into a speaking exam? To some extent, listening. Yes, you're right. So, Olivia, what happens with speaking is the ability to hear what the other person said and respond appropriately. That's one of the, so role play is one of the ways you can test it, but what do we actually assess? Fluency, Janet. Yes, good. So their ability to sort of have connected speech. So they're not sounding like a robot, and they're not thinking of a word. So you can see that they're fluent. Accent. Ooh, Danny, that's a really interesting one. So we don't analyze accent per se. What we talk about, you'll love this, we talk about non-standard phonemes. So I don't mind if you say bath or bath, grass or grass, but there's got to be a sort of a standard phoneme in there. So if you're coming into my speaking assessment and you're saying grass, you're using a non-standard phoneme in there. So to some extent it is accent, Danny. We don't talk about accent. This is a very touchy subject, so we talk about non-standard phonemes. So Olivia, those are all ways that we assess. So describing a picture, role play, those are the ways that we assess it. But what do we actually analyse? So conversation skills, so yes, the ability to respond appropriately, yes. Anything else? Yes, well done, Simona. Grammar, pronunciation, your ability to verbalise concepts, opinions, ideas, thoughts. Absolutely good. Accuracy, Chloe, lovely, wonderful. Fluency, Olivia, yes. Pronunciation and intonation, yes. Absolutely, Monty. So if the recipient, so if the listener has actually understood the idea, good. So the vocabulary, yes, all of those things, absolutely wonderful. Good. So we don't just analyse speaking, we actually break speaking down into sort of its constituent parts. Lovely. And we analyse all of those separately. So their ability to deliver, so the delivery is all your pronunciation. We analyse their language, so their language controls, so their vocabulary, their grammar. We analyse their ability to respond appropriately, and the sort of the ability to maintain a conversation, so turn taking, involving the other person, that sort of thing. Good. What does intermediate mean? B1 and B2 in the middle. Love that, in the middle. That's a nice one. Not basic, not advanced. Yeah. Basically, the idea of intermediate, better than beginner. Oh, I like that, Janet. That's a nice phrase. It really doesn't mean an awful lot, is the answer to that question. It's a little bit vague, and you're right, Olivia, in the sense that it's not basic and it's not advanced. There's a huge gap in the middle, and so you'll find a lot of students describe themselves as intermediate, and it doesn't really mean a great deal. So what we want to try and avoid with things like that is terminology that doesn't really help the students, doesn't really give them a great indication. Good. Any idea which skills are generally better, your passive or your active skills? So your passive skills are your listening and your reading, your active skills or your productive skills are your speaking and your writing. Yeah, your passive skills are generally better. So generally, to give you a very sort of simple example, generally we can all read and understand Harry Potter or Jane Austen or Charles Dickens, but I don't know about you lot. I don't feel like I'm the next Dickens or J.K. Rowling. So I can read it, I can understand it, I can love it, but my writing skills are not as good as my reading skills. Excellent. What's the problem with relying solely on a grammar test? I'm sure you'll all be very good at this. What is the problem with relying solely on a grammar test? Yeah, it doesn't use the skills you would use in the real world, Georgina. It doesn't test a series of other skills. Oh, Simon, thank you. It excludes context. One of my biggest bugbears with grammar tests is that you have what we call discrete items. So in other words, a short sentence, you're testing one little thing, there is no context. It's incredibly difficult. I don't know if you've ever tried a grammar test in your own language. Not that easy. And I have a real issue with them. So it really doesn't take anything else into account, does it? It's it's got a very narrow window. By all means, use them, but use them sparingly. Don't use it as your sole. Good. So we've got some official exams that I wanted to sort of introduce you to quickly. You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go into the wheres and wherefores of each one. Suffice to say, these are official ones. Feel free to go and have a look at their websites and do a little bit of reading if you're not familiar with them. So the first one is the IELTS. This is a huge exam. I cannot begin to tell you how large this exam is. Actually, I can. I'm lying to you. Last year, there were over 3.5 million tests taken around the world for IELTS. So it is a huge money spinner. The three stakeholders involved in IELTS are Cambridge University, British Council, and an organisation called IDP, which is an Australian organisation. They own it, they run it, and it has sort of slowly made its way up the ranking in exams to sort of become #1. And it's used for immigration purposes and university entrance. So if you are not an English as a first speaker you need to show that you can do, or that you can speak and deal with English to a certain level. IELTS is your sort of go-to test. You'll also find that people who want to come and work in the NHS often end up doing IELTS. They have to get a certain level of IELTS. It's used in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Ireland, the US, Canada. It's an incredibly universal test. 3 biggest markets for IELTS: China, this is going to be controversial, Hong Kong, whether you count those two as separate or together, I'm not going down that road, and the third one is India. Huge exams in those parts of the world. So you'll come across that a lot. Now, one of the weird things about IELTS is that the exam it's only valid for 2 years. So once you've got your certificate, it lasts for 2 years and then it expires. It's a great way to get people to do the exam more and more and more. So we've also got what we call Cambridge Main Suite. Now, Cambridge Main Suite is a little bit more friendly in the sense that once you have your exam, it lasts for life. It's valid forever, and what's lovely about it is that you enter for a level. So with IELTS, what's weird is everybody sits the same exam. So if you're doing, there are 2 exams, there's IELTS General, IELTS Academic. Most people do the Academic. Everybody sits the same exam around the world at the same time, and you get a band score. So if you sit there in the exam and don't write anything, you get a 0. You can go all the way up to 9, so 9 is the highest IELTS score. So everybody sits the same exam, and it is the responsibility of the student to produce the language of the level. So it's quite challenging in that sense. Cambridge Main Suite is much easier. It's divided into levels, so there are different exams for each level. It starts off with what's called the Key English Test, which is the basic one, goes all the way through to Cambridge Proficiency, which is still, in my mind, the gold standard. If you've got Cambridge Proficiency, there is nothing better. And there are lots of sort of exams in the middle. It's good, it lasts for life, it's a very rigorous exam, and it is accepted by British Immigration University, so it is a great exam to do. The thing with it, the reason it's not as popular as IELTS, is that they don't run the exam quite so often. It's much easier to enrol in an IELTS exam than it is to find a Cambridge Main Suite. Trinity is also another huge exam. Their ISE exams are also recognised by immigration and universities, but they also have a lovely range of speaking exams which work really well for littlies, for the children. And again, they have a huge range of exams covering every single level, and you enrol in the correct level. Lots of information on their website. They've got a fabulous website actually with loads of videos of people doing exams, so you can see what the exam looks like. OET is a newish one, and it's the Occupational English Test, and it's used at the moment for people wanting to come and work in the NHS. As I said, it's relatively new. It's still sort of fighting for place, but you might come across people, nurses, doctors, wanting to do that because they want to come and work. And it's a little bit friendlier than IELTS. There's also Pearson's English Test, which is all online, so even the speaking is done online, so it's quite popular for that sense. There is a sort of a rumour out there that Pearson's is easier than IELTS. I don't know what to say, really. And then you've got sort of American ones that are called TOEFL. They're less popular these days. They've come down in popularity, mainly because they don't sort of test at quite the same rigor as some of the ones we've just discussed there. So this is the the Common European Framework, the CEFR, and you can see that we start right in the middle. Effectively, the middle of this chart is 0, and then we move to A1, A2, so those are our basic levels, B1, B2, C1, C2. So this is where we can really see if somebody's got a jagged profile, because if you are, let's say, B2 in reading and a B1 in listening, then the line isn't going to be even all the way around. The line is going to go up and down. Okay, so that's where we can see where people have got sort of needs that they need to focus on, what they're doing well, and the idea obviously is to try and even out those lines and move people up. C2 is the maximum you can be. If you are C2, you are a proficient speaker of English. C2 is a 9 at IELTS. It's Cambridge proficiency. It's Trinity ISE 4 or GESE grade 12. So it really is the absolute max. There are no exams beyond C2, that's it. To give you a slightly better idea, we often use can-do statements. So this is taken from the Common European Framework, and I do apologise when you blow it up, it's a little bit blurry, but you'll find lots of them on the internet. So you can see that A0 isn't included. A0 is literally your starting, so you can't do anything. But A1, you can see with the reading, for example, can understand very short, simple text. Simple phrase, familiar names, words, basic phrases, so really very, very simple. When we get up to C2, can understand a wide range of long and complex text. So a wide range means literally text from any source, so magazines, newspapers, books. So at that stage, they should be able to read literature in English. They should be able to read lots of different newspapers. They really are using English absolutely fluently. And you'll see as well that for things like speaking, they've got a good command of idiomatic expressions, whereas at the bottom here, can interact in a simple way. Communication is totally dependent on repetition to slow rates. So this is where you've got to really slow your speech down. If you're having to slow your speech down, your student is not a C2 level. Okay, so that's a sort of a look at the framework. I would encourage you to go and have a look on the website, have a play around with it. Go and look at the Trinity website. So it's trinitycollege.org, I think it is. But if you Google Trinity College, they have a really, really comprehensive outline of all the levels. I can thoroughly recommend it. So that's all very nice, but how do we do it? So there are lots of different ways you can test your students. So one of the things I like to do is I like to use video. When I say video, I just mean get your phone out and record each other. What I always check with students is make sure that they record themselves on their phone. So if you're getting somebody else to, so if I want somebody to record me, I give my phone to them and they record me on my phone. That way you control that the content stays on the person's phone and you don't have any sort of protection issues. So quite a nice way of doing this. So you can do, you can give them a subject, so my hometown, why do I love English, what did I do last weekend, why I love my job, etc. And they have to give a little presentation, you record it, and then both of you watch it back. So I put the recording in the middle, we play it, and we both make a list. And I do a list of smiley face and a list of sort of sad face, challenges. And I write all the good things and I write all the things that they need to work on. Now, I always try and make sure that my happy list is longer than my short list. Mainly because that works on confidence. It builds their confidence, because you will find that they focus more on the sad face than the happy face, and it's up to us as the teacher to try and balance it out. Okay, then compare your lists and see where you were the same, and that really helps them work on what they need to work on. So it's a really good way of identifying any gaps. Write it down. This is a really great exercise to do. So this is really fun. I do this with all levels. So ask students to write down everything they did at the weekend, for example. And they have to write a sentence of 27 words. And I'm very precise about this, to summarise what they've done. Check for grammatical accuracy, so make sure that the 27 words are accurate. And they can do this, if you've got a big group, they can do this in groups. And you can do it for something like, you know, what's the best thing about your country, or, you know, what should I do this weekend? And you get them to write 27 words. Then they have to reduce it down to 17. Now, if I'm feeling particularly mean, which happens, I might get them to swap groups. So I might give somebody else's 27 to another group and they have to work with theirs. Depends how mean I'm feeling. And then when they've done that, we check for grammatical accuracy and we reduce it down to 7. Now then, what you can gauge with this activity is a lot of things. First of all, you're checking for grammatical accuracy. You're checking their ability to summarise. You're checking for their ability to write concisely, which is really important in academic writing, in presentations and professional emails. So it's a really useful exam skill, this. You're checking for their ability to work together as well, so they're doing some teamwork. I allow them to use dictionaries, I allow them to use the internet, whatever they can do to make sure that it's correct. And I often give a prize for the one that I think is the best. So it's really good fun, this, and as I said, you can do it in a group. Works really nicely. So we can also do another write it down. So this is more perhaps individual and more sort of reflecting at the beginning of the course. So what do I want to learn? So what do I want to get out of this course? What do I find easy? What do I find difficult? What are my strengths? It's almost like a SWOT analysis, isn't it? And the good thing about this is that you're really giving them a chance to do free writing. And you're really asking them what they want to get out of the course. It's a really good way of doing a sort of needs analysis, a test, checking that your objectives and their objectives match. So it serves a number of functions, this one, and it's really useful. Also, I mean, again, you can, if people are struggling, they can just write single words. If people are feeling more confident, they can do longer sort of prose. So you're doing a lot of testing here. You're really checking grammar, vocabulary, writing ability, so discourse, putting things together, structure. So this is a really useful one to do as well. So you can see we've got sort of speaking, we've got sort of conciseness, grammar, vocabulary. We've got objectives, what they already find difficult. So we've got sort of speaking and writing here. You can also do write and speak, so put the two things together. And I do this a lot, actually, all about me, because remember that students mainly like to speak about themselves. That's a very strong motivator. And the reason for it is when we speak about ourselves, we get a dopamine hit. So that's why social media is so addictive, why we like to talk about ourselves, because we get that strong dopamine hit. Basically, we're all drug addicts. So all about me, 3 things that you enjoy doing, 3 people that are important to you. You can see the list there. And what I get them to do is I get them to make notes and then speak about it. And then I'm checking both things. I'm checking their writing and I'm checking their speaking. And I can really sort of drill down and ask as well. If they're doing it with partners, get them to really sort of encourage them to really ask questions. And then when you do the feedback, you can ask the partner what their partner said to them. Okay, so you're not asking the person, you're asking the person that they spoke to. So test listening skills as well. You can see I often carry it on as well. Then I do all about English. So again, I'm starting to move into a needs analysis, and I'm seeing what they find easy, what they find most difficult. And we're starting, if you can see there, to think about learner autonomy. Okay, so the best way to remember vocabulary is I'll get better at speaking if I. So I want them to really start thinking about what they can do, what's in their power to do to get the most out of our classes. So it's not all down to me as the teacher. I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm the guide at the side. Okay, so I'm helping them to develop and become more autonomous. And then I also do free writing tasks. So I might do, for example, a postcard home. I might get them to write a typical email that they do for work. I might get them to do a diary entry. I might get them to do a social media post, so reviewing something and then posting it. I might get them to do a film review or a book review. Book reviews are really great in a class of young learners. It really encourages reading. And what I used to do with my book reviews, I can't remember why I started doing this, but the kids come in and we had a sort of a set routine, and they would come in, they would give me their book reviews, they would go and exchange their book in the book box, they would go and sit and read quietly while I quickly had a look through the reviews, And then I always, I awarded what we called the Top Banana Book Review Prize. I don't know why I came up with Top Banana. And basically all that I did was I wrote Top Banana at the top of their book reviews, and I told everybody why it was Top Banana, and they loved it. And what I discovered by doing that was that it started to encourage people to become more creative, to write longer. It was really amazing to see the progress of the reviews from the beginning of the year to the end. So I can really recommend doing stuff like that. It's really good fun. And of course, don't forget, the school's level test and exam. The school will have one. You'll be following it. Don't worry. You know, they will get one. You can do reading comprehension. So really simple way of checking that their reading skills are coming along. A lot of the course books have their own progress tests at the end of a certain number of chapters, and they have exams as well. So use those. The students will be happy with those. Don't forget to ask them about tests that they've already done before they come to you. So have they done any official exams? Get them to bring the certificate and show you. And you can use online tests as well. So particularly if they're preparing for sort of official exams, you'll find that there's loads and loads of online material, online tests for those, and you can sort of set them every now and again in the class. Okay. And I think what's really important when you're assessing your students is spend time with them at the beginning. Okay. Really get to know what level they are, really get to know what their goals are, and by doing that you're going to build a lot of rapport, a lot of trust, a lot of confidence in you as the teacher, but you're going to build the confidence in them as students. They're going to know they're in safe hands and that you're going to really, really help them meet their goals, and I think that's key. So that is a whiz through assessment for you. On Monday, we're going to be looking at teaching a skill. So how do we teach a skill? And I've got some sort of practical ideas for you of how to do that. And then on Wednesday, we've got our final class, which is our taking this forward advice, any questions that you want to ask me. And of course, does anybody have any questions? Oh, interesting, Simon. Yes, some links to more information on dopamine release and talking about oneself. Yes, I need to have a look and find out where it was, but I was reading the review. However, Simon, and this is really good for everybody actually, there is an awful lot of information. If you go and have a look at emotional intelligence, so EQ, the Harvard University has done a lot of research on it, some really interesting sort of facts coming out about emotional intelligence, and the more we learn about the brain, the better. That's a really good one to have a look at. Also, for those of you who are not familiar with Brené Brown, go and have a look at Brené Brown. Anything that she's done is just amazing. So her TED Talks, she's done quite a few sort of presentations. There's loads of stuff online, all free. Brilliant. She rocks. She so doesn't she, Simon? She's I can watch her for hours. She's brilliant. Good question, Danny. How do you help a student who's falling behind? It depends on the reason that they're falling behind. So if it's because they're struggling to find time at home to study, maybe you can encourage them to stay after class and just do a little bit of study there and then. Perhaps talk to them, coach them a little bit, see how they can find some time to do some work to help build up the level. So it might be that, you know, as they're going to school, they just put their headphones in and do a little bit of listening. If it's because they've got sort of special education needs, then I would go and speak to your director of studies and get some help, because it might be that that's beyond your sort of knowledge at the moment. It might be that you need to bring in parents if it's younger learners, and you might need to talk to them about sort of ways that they can scaffold the students' learning at home. So maybe by encouraging them to read stories, watch cartoons, things like that. I often sort of suggest to people that they start off with adverts. So don't start off with the program, start off with the advert, because adverts are very visual and you can replay them a few times. and that's quite a good way of doing it. If they're a bit older and a bit of a better level, then things like documentaries are really good. So David Attenborough, oh, national treasure for many reasons, but one of the reasons he's really good is because he slows his speech down. He's got a very beautiful way of speaking that's very easy to follow. So find things that are going to really encourage them. Find books or graphic novels that they're going to enjoy. So talk to your student and find out, you know, what they really enjoy doing and what they could find time to do in their free time. So, you know, if they love films, find some really good Disney, Pixar, fabulous. Things like Kung Fu Panda, awesome. Because the level of English is really clear. Often they've got subtitles. There's a lovely moral in the background normally. So those are really good films to use. Documentaries, as I said, so David Attenborough, people like Lucy Worsley, Dan Snow, very clear language, and you can put subtitles on, they're fabulous. Those are the sorts of things that you can do to help. Okay, does that help, Danny? I hope that answers that question for you. So yeah, just talk to your students. Lovely. Anybody else got any other questions that they want to ask? You're most welcome, Danny. Lovely. Well, if that's everything for today, once again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday at 10 o'clock. And remember that if you've got any questions, store them up, and we'll have lots of time next Wednesday to answer any doubts, questions, concerns, anything like that that you've got. Okay, in the meantime, have a super day and have a lovely weekend, and go and enjoy that sunshine. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Lovely to see you. Bye bye for now.